Okay, shall we begin? Hello, thanks for coming. Welcome. Welcome first of all to IATEFL 2019. Hey, here we go. Strap in. It all gets. We all start now. Welcome. Thanks for coming. Welcome to the talk that I have called functional, not functional. Functional. And I'm going to be looking at a few ideas that I've been developing that kind of help you to teach and help your students to write better task 2 IELTS essays, particularly with regard to this kind of situation where maybe they're not developing their ideas or they're getting a little bit stuck when they're coming up with ideas and not kind of fleshing them out. And also, what language they're using. Are they showing enough of a range of language? And I'm going to touch also on using the public band descriptors that are there, and they're a very useful resource, and they can kind of inform your teaching really well as a resource tool. And it's this approach really is something I've been developing over the past year or so. And I first kind of got into it when I was writing on mindset for IELTS, which is Cambridge's most recent IELTS series. And I've been kind of playing around with it and fleshing it out ever since, really. I'm going to be using examples that I wrote for level 3 today. Now, just so you know, level 3, that's aimed at kind of people who are looking to get 6.5 and onwards from there. Okay, so it's pretty high level language. The important point is, what I'm telling you is the concept is essentially scalable. So it's not necessarily a case of you have to be a high level student to do this. The ideas are essentially the same from there downwards. So before we jump into the kind of the nitty-gritty of it all, I just want to go back in time a little bit, and I'm going to tell you about a moment where I was a very inexperienced IELTS teacher. I didn't know what I was doing, really. I didn't know what am I telling my students? Does it work? Is it actually right? I think this is an experience that a lot of IELTS teachers share. They go, yeah, I'm teaching it, but am I doing it right? So I collared a colleague at the school I was working at, the language school I was working at. He was kind of a grizzled veteran of the IELTS classroom, you know, the kind of hoary old, he'd seen it all. An elder statesman of IELTS teaching was what he would define himself as. And I said to him, I don't know what I'm doing. Am I doing this right? Can you give me some pointers? And he said, yeah, that's fine. Bring me a couple of essays that your students have written. I'll have a look and I'll tell you where you're going wrong. Okay, vote of confidence there. So I brought him a couple of essays, and one in particular I thought was really good. I was proud of what my student had come up with and what they'd written. And it was discuss advantages, disadvantages, and give your own opinion type question. Okay, and he got this essay, and then he started to read, and he read the introduction. I'm going to show you, you're going to read the introduction. I'm going to give you a moment to read it now. Okay, here is the introduction to this essay. Okay, I thought that was good. But he read this introduction, and at that point, ladies and gentlemen, further reading came there none. He actually got quite angry, and he slammed the essay on the table, and he said, no. And I said, what? What's wrong with it? And he said, okay, it's IELTS, Greg, it's IELTS. Number one, it's an IELTS essay. Don't put your opinion in the introduction. Leave your opinion till the end. That's for the conclusion. Is it? Yeah, it is. And another thing, get rid of all the flowery stuff. All that kind of elaborate, I would count myself amongst their number. No, we don't. It's an IELTS essay, Greg. Some people believe this, other people believe that. And he said, the thing you need to do, Greg, is get your students to produce an essay that is just functional. A functional essay. And I thought, really? And what he meant was functional as in serviceable. Does the job, you know, not quite bog standard, not bare minimum, a couple of steps up. And my first thought was, okay, how do you teach that? How do you actually teach a student to make their writing more serviceable? You know, they hand something in and then you hand it back and go, and they say, ask you, was it any good? Yeah, it was, but next time just make it a bit more bland. So how do you teach that? Make it more functional, Greg. But I also thought, hang on a minute, I'm not sure what he's telling me here. And this was the first time I actually went to the public band descriptors and thought, I need to check this out. Band descriptors for task response. So task response, basically, how well they're answering the question, have they scrutinised the question, are they developing their answers well enough? And I thought, hang on a minute, let's look at this. This is band 6, and this is band 7. And I was quite interested because I saw, in band 6, you present a relevant position. Okay, fine. In band 7, you present a clear position throughout the response. For me, probably for you, the word throughout suggests from start to finish, from top to bottom, throughout the response. But what he was telling me was no, put it in the conclusion. I was right. I was absolutely right. And this is something that you really should encourage your students to do because it's there in black and white. The examiner wants to see a clear position throughout the response. If you're telling your students don't do it, don't put your opinion until the conclusion, they might get stuck there. Okay, and this is what I found as I continued teaching, and then I later became an IELTS examiner. Yeah, that's what we want to see. So, as I went through teaching, I became familiar with this. Is anybody else familiar with the stuck-on phenomenon?
You mean the phenomenon that your student gets 6.5 and cannot get more than 6.5?
Exactly that. Whatever they do, however many times they go back to do the exam, they come back and say, the Friday comes and they say, I've got 5.5 in writing again. And whatever they do, they're stuck on a score. And whatever they do, they can't seem to get past it. So I asked students about this. Well, why does this happen? And a lot of the time they say, I got into the exam and I didn't know what to write. The question was difficult. I don't know anything about the topic. And so I started to think about this and think, okay, well, let's have a look at those band descriptors again. Band 6, band 7. In terms of developing ideas, presents relevant main ideas. That's kind of like my old friend's bog standard, isn't it? It's just presents the ideas. Presents. Terminology is important. Presents, extends, and supports main ideas. You've got to do that to get a 7. If you're not doing it, you can't hope to get a 7. So how do you actually do this presenting, extending, and supporting main ideas? And this is something that this is from mindset. This is from level 3 mindset, where it's about main and supporting ideas. Students know what a topic sentence is, and they know what function it's there to serve. It's to introduce the main idea of a paragraph and say, this is what I'm going to be talking about in this. And here is a topic sentence. The context of this is the advantages and disadvantages of doing contact sports. And what the book does, again, this is level 3, it sets out a range of examples for the students to say, does this sentence actually follow on from the topic sentence? Does it develop and support the topic sentence? Because that might be what you're not quite doing right. So here is one example of supporting the topic sentence. So this is, what do you think? What do you think? Does the second sentence follow on from logically, and does it kind of support and develop the topic sentence? Do you think so? I think that's fine. It's kind of, there's an obvious benefit of participating in a contact sport. If you participate in a contact sport, it's good for your physical health. This is actually fine. I would say it's fine. Because what's it doing functionally? And this is where we get to this point of getting the students to think about the function of what's coming up. This is a cause and effect. Doing that leads to that. It's a cause and effect idea. That's the function of it. And in this section, it gives more examples. I'm not going to go through them all because we haven't really got the time. So cause and effect idea. Because this, that happens. This happens, so that happens. But there's others there. There's a specific supporting example that's given. And a lot of the time, the examples that my students give, they're kind of wishy-washy, or they're not really an example. There's something different. A cause and effect argument supports the topic sentence, but shows a contrasting view that looks at another side of the argument. Additional point. And this is developing students' understanding of what function is in a sentence and what it does. And if they can get to that point, then they realise that from a topic sentence, they have got various routes that they can take off it. Here's another example. Which one is this? Right, now when I get this in the classroom, they don't see that it's showing a contrast. The initial thing they think is, that doesn't follow on from the topic sentence. That says a topic sentence and then it contrasts it immediately, so that's not good. No, it isn't. Because what is the main point of that sentence? It's at the end. The vast majority of people who take part gain a high level of fitness. And what you're showing them is not actually that difficult. You're saying, here's a topic sentence, but show another side to the argument before you give yours. That's a contrast, that's concession. It supports the topic sentence, but shows a contrasting view that looks at another side of the argument. That's not something that a lot of people do. But it's functional, and it is really quite a sophisticated way of giving an argument. It's not saying this because this. It's saying, OK, fair enough, that. But this is more important. And let's go back to those band descriptors. Addition, example, specific example, concession, cause and effect. If they understand how function works with sentences, they are more likely to be able to get up to that because they've got more options. And this is the important thing. They can look at a question and an idea from a range of different angles, from more than just this because this. Possibly, we could get up to that if they're doing it really well. That's difficult to get, but not impossible. It's nothing related to language. It's 25% of the overall marks. You are basically thinking through the essay. How does grammatical range and accuracy fit onto that?
They have to show that they know how to use, for example, linking phrases, a range of grammar, not only passive voice, for example. So that shows that they know how to, be flexible and versatile through the language. Yeah, so you have to show a range of grammar. They can show versatility.
I'm just saying they need to show a variety of sentences, like the simple, complex, model, question sentences and all.
Simple, complex, that sort of thing. Right, exactly. Let's have a look at those band descriptors again. To get to 5, is one of the things you need to do to get to 5. To get to 6, to get to 7. Look at the language that's used there. A limited range of structures is a 5. A mix of simple and complex is a 6. If you want to get a 7, you need a variety of complex structures. So it's exactly this. It's not just thinking about using one particular thing. And this is the interesting part. And this is where I think so many people miss out a stage of the planning process. And this is, what I'm going to show you here is my recommended planning process. And this is what, a lot of people do this. They brainstorm their ideas, they get some ideas together, what can I write about? They choose their ideas that they're going to write out. At this point, I'm getting them to think about function. What are your ideas? Are they cause and effect? Is there a concession in this idea? And then they plan the structure. Most people then jump to that stage. I say most people, a lot of my students kind of spend about a minute on one and then just jump to 5 and start scribbling away like a lunatic and then wondering why they've run out of ideas and things to say. A hugely important stage in the planning process is that. Don't start writing until you've thought about the language that you're going to use to express what you want to say. Figure out what you want to say functionally, figure out your range of ideas, and then think about what language actually works for it. How long do you recommend telling students to? How long would I recommend students dedicate to planning? Not a great deal of time on number 1, more time on 2, not a lot of time on 3. Probably the most amount of time that really helps is actually thinking about 4. How do I say this? Because ideas, once you've got a basic, this is what I hope to show in a minute, once you've got a basic idea and you know how to look at it from a range of angles, then you know how to plop the grammar on top of it and you keep it functional. And this is an example we've got from Mindset Level 3, where instead of just sentence function, we look at the grammar. Contrast and concession, complex sentences with despite and although. Now, I'm just going to put this part of the book, I'm going to put it onto the board here. Because there's not a lot of time, I am going to read it. I know it's so annoying when you're trying to read the board and the person who's speaking actually reads along with you. I'm well aware of that, but I'm going to do it because of the time issues. So, this is what we're doing. you have a model essay that they look at and they think about what to do. And this sentence here in italics and underlined is taken from that essay. And it asks them to find what are the grammatically correct paraphrases of that underlined part. Despite the fact that people need to communicate regularly with their loved ones in order to be happy, it appears that physical contact is not as vital as once thought. Which of the 3 options given is not grammatically correct?
Number 1.
It's number 2. It's number 2. Number 2 is not correct. It would be correct. You could, and this is the thing to tell the students all the time. It would be correct if the word despite was although. And this is so we've got despite the fact that despite and what once we've looked at that and we've looked at the language and how it all fits together and how it works and we've done some kind of breaking it down. This is what they end up with. A type 1 despite clause, which is despite the fact that. That is the least complex of all of them. It's basically like saying although. Despite plus an ing and then despite plus a noun phrase. This kind of the complexity is going up there. But I tend to refer to them in my classes as type 1, type 2 or type 3. Just to strip out the meta language. So the student will be thinking about an idea and you're monitoring and then you say, oh, that's a good idea. That's concession. Think about it. Give me a type 2. Give me a type 2 despite clause. That's the shorthand, and it's really useful. So let's look at how the process works. Go back to this question. Let's go back to this question. And 3 or 4 weeks ago, I did this in the class. I gave them this question, and I asked them to come up with some ideas. Now, a lot of the students I teach are kind of 16, 17, 18 years old, and they're kind of hoping to go to a university in this country, but they're 16, 17, 18 years old, and they all came up with this idea. One of the disadvantages, people live for a longer time, but they don't enjoy themselves, they're too old. Almost all of them said that, because when you're 16, if you pass the age of 30, you might as well just go and get measured up for a coffin, and that is it, they're too old. But, do that. Bam, you are up a stage. It suddenly becomes more of a complex sentence. Despite the fact that this happened. And show them, despite, or strip out the fact that, and then change the verb form. I know it's enormously reductive. It's kind of, the way that you dream of teaching language is not necessarily the way you have to do it in art. Sometimes you have to really flag up the analytical stages of a grammatical change. Despite people living for a longer time, they don't enjoy themselves. And then, if they're able to do it, and now despite their longer lives, you are adding layers of complexity. And all they've done is come up with an idea that is a contrasting idea, as a concession there. But it doesn't, let's not stop. Let's not stop at that. While, that's another option. While people live for a longer time, they don't enjoy themselves. Okay, there's another option. So we've got 3 types despite, we've got while. The comparative. The comparative. The longer people live, the less they enjoy themselves. They're too old. So we're getting a range of options here. Now this one isn't expressing, it's not expressing concession. What's the functional nature of this sentence? It's cause and effect. So you're kind of raising their awareness of what structures you can ascribe to which function and which ones go hand in hand with it. I'm going to give you an actual example. This is an authentic example from my classroom. Again, this was about a month and a half ago. And this is the question. This is the question that we were working on. And I gave them to think about. And in answer to your question earlier on, I said, you've got 3 minutes. Get ideas, and I'll put them into pairs. Just get as many ideas as you can, and then we'll go through them. And within a couple of minutes, they come up with... This is basically, I took a photo. This is me writing on the board. Higher qualifications, but less practical knowledge, which is a bit of a negative thing. If you get a degree, it can be costly and time-consuming, but better job prospects at the end. More people going into tertiary education. However, the quality of the qualification may suffer. Huge choice of degrees. There's more universities offering more things, but mean that the student makes the wrong decision. Those were just ideas they came up with. And then we went into, look at that. It took me hours to do that. Then I start thinking, right, what have we got? What's the function? What function could it be, your idea here? Think about it. Think about what function you've got. When you're coming up with these ideas, what function is it? Is it that? Is it that? Is it that? Can you think of a specific supporting example? Addition. On top of that, okay. This is the board. This is the board. I'm not going to ask you to read that. It's too small, so I'm going to break it down. This was the question. Let's look at this idea. Higher qualifications. Yeah, you get more, but less practical knowledge. So I started them off, and I said, okay, let's start with while. That is my writing on the board, but honestly, I listed the language. It wasn't me just going, right, copy this down. It was, let's think about how it works. And this is what they came up with. While a great number of people today leave university with good qualifications, they often have less practical knowledge of the world. That's quite nice. That's quite nice. Okay, class. And now you can see this is their writing on the board. They're giving me type 1s. Despite the fact that a great number of people are leaving university, despite a greater number of people leaving, they're doing all this. They are doing this. Because we've been through, we've had a look at it, we've had a think about it, and now we're factoring in the language, despite the good qualifications gained by a greater number of people. What a range of options we've suddenly got. Here's another one. This was a high-level class. This was a high-level class, okay? And what I'm not going to show you absolutely everything from the board, because again, we haven't really got the time. But this is what I pushed them to try and do. You know, I put that on the board there. The more time-consuming and intense the degree is, the transform this. How do we get that to work in this sentence? And the what? And really kind of getting them to think about the language that they're using. And this is the brilliant thing. Because so often, people think that IELTS teaching is just exam skills and preparation. It's not. You're still a language teacher. You're still teaching language to them. As long as they know they're doing it in a particular context that is right for IELTS, they'll be receptive to it. I said at the beginning, this is not necessarily for high-level students only. It's scalable. I gave my class that. You could ask them to get to this point, which is less complex, less demanding. The harder a student works, the more likely it is they will get a better job. That's not quite as complex as what we had originally. Take it down a little level. The more difficult a degree is, the more respect there is for the graduate. So think about the level of your class and adapt what you're asking them to do. But the principle still stands, is if they can identify what a function is, then they can see what language is brilliant for piggybacking on top of that function.
So how would you deal with mixed level classes?
That's a very good question. I'm not going to answer it now because we've only got a few minutes in the talk. And that's a whole different area. I'll speak to you at the end if you want. Now let's go back to those band descriptors. What we are giving them is the opportunity to get there. They have got the chance to use a variety of complex structures because you've gone through them with them and they know which functions that you're dealing with and which one expresses which function. And it's really quite empowering for them. And for this class, for example, we also looked at cause and effect. What other things could we do with cause and effect? There's hypothetical cause and effect. If this didn't happen, that would happen. Ah, okay, there's another structure. For emphasis of addition, not only does this occur, but that occurs as well. And that's you as a language teacher thinking about what structures do I know that I can show them will apply to this idea. Temper that. You know, your class may not be ready to do all of them, but I don't think there's much harm in showing them and giving them the opportunity to do it. So, yeah, I think it's useful. It really works for me. I'm conscious that we are running a little short of time, but I'm going to try and show you this very, very quickly. This is another question that I gave my class. And I'm going to quickly show you kind of authentic response to that. This was one of my students who was totally part of the stuck-on phenomenon. 5.5s, once he got a 6. But after kind of working on this together, I mean, not only can the ability to purchase products from other countries ensure top quality projects, but also accelerate improvement. Okay, we've got a despite clause there. That's a nice despite clause, isn't it? While society is enjoying all these benefits, some people are concerned that countries might lose their own characteristics. Despite some special cases. Wow. This is kind of, he's taken it up a notch. He has taken this up a notch here. The more trades two countries do, the less chance there is for a war to happen. He's gone a bit off topic there. And that's the thing. That's the thing. That's where you go, no, rein it in. But he's using some really nice language. And task response, maybe part of it, he's not really addressing. He's not there for an A. He's got a point that he's gone off a little bit, so he needs a little bit more help in getting to task response at that point and getting that score up. But look at that. I mean, it's kind of, is he a band 5? Is he make no frequent grammatical errors? He's got a range of language going on. A mix of simple and complex sentence forms. I think, it's more than that. There's a variety of complex structures in that. And it gave him that kind of opportunity to get to a point of going into the test room. And there is a happy ending, because this is a guy who he did it. He met his university requirements. He got 7.5 overall, and he got 6.5 in writing. And he's now met his requirements, so he's offered for UCL. I'm going to be going into this in a bit more detail next week in a webinar. It's next Thursday at 11 o'clock. So I'm going to kind of expand on these ideas a little bit if you want to register and have a listen to that. But it is a wonderful happy ending, and he's really, really pleased, and he managed to, he's fulfilled this thing that was driving him mad that he got stuck on, and he did it by keeping it functional, not functional. Thank you. Thanks for listening.